When I was young, I really thought I would just work for people for the rest of my life. I was just like, run a business, that's so much work. But the thing I realized, I at some point was very clear about what I wanted and what I wanted to build, and it had a lot to do with home. I didn't have a moment where I was just like, oh, I want to be a producer and the way I'm going to attack. No, I was just like, I want money. And that was the opportunity that was available at the time.
Interesting.
You don't have to do all things. Pick the thing that you know is your thing and do it well. Put all your energy into that. Don't kill yourself at it because I can make money from 5 of these jobs that are paying me 20K. And then I'm like,
Good evening and welcome to the Late Night Business. My name is Ian Dennis, and tonight we have a very interesting conversation lined up because my guest tonight is literally not new into all this particular environment that you are in, the production environment. She knows all about the lights, all about the sound and all that stuff. And before I get to reveal my guest, I'd like to let you know that you're here at the Capital Club, the place that you need to be as an entrepreneur, because at the Capital Club, one thing you always say, your net worth, or rather your net worth is your network. And at the Capital Club, you get to meet who's who and get to increase your particular net worth. The guest I'm speaking about is Carol Kiyoko, who's the founder of Lemon Slice Pictures. I almost said production.
just like, no.
I was like, no, you mentioned it before we started the show.
Pictures.
I need to be very careful. Thanks so much, Carol, for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm very glad you're here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Black and black.
Hey, I didn't even know, but hey, great minds.
I should
clearly.
Just change mine. I was supposed to wear something else. Like, she's in black. Let me just wear black.
I see influencer energy.
Yes,
I like it.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
The first question I like starting all my conversations. What are you feeling most grateful for today?
Life. Just in general, I think being alive, coming out of the pandemic, I'm like, being alive is such a privilege. But I'm also grateful that I get to do what I love. Like, I wake up in the morning, I'm not working for anybody, I'm working for myself, and I get to make choices of how I do that. And those are the two things for sure. Even when I'm having a bad day, I go back to that and I'm like, gratitude. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Something that you've mentioned, that you do what you love, and I was just going through, what's it called, just trying to research and stalking you. You got to know it at 19.
Yes.
That's quite early.
I know. And it wasn't like, it's so funny, whenever I tell like my origin story, it's not like I was like in high school, what I should do is. No, it honestly, sometimes I feel like it was fluke, but I know it wasn't fluke. I'm very sure it was purpose. And I was surrounded by a lot of older people. So when all my friends were like leaving high school to go to campus, me, I was leaving high school to go make money because I wasn't like asking my parents for bus fare no more. And so my first job was actually at a cyber cafe in Ngumo. I was being, I was being paid 3K. It was literally like a month after high school. I was being paid 3K to sit at a desk and type, and that's why I learned how to type, like 150 words a minute. And then like 3 months after that, then I got a job in production. So it wasn't really like I was intentionally looking for it, and I just went into a TV station as a sales agent. And then I got to see what a studio looked like. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. So it wasn't, I didn't have a moment where I was just like, oh, I want to be a producer and the way I'm going to attack. No, I was just like, I want money. And that was the opportunity that was available at the time. Yeah.
So before 19, let's now rewind. Because I always try to create a picture of where exactly it is. Your initial years were like, because your initial years always paint a picture as the direction you got to pursue. So why did you grow up? Did you grow up in Ngumo?
I was raised, okay, so first I'm a daughter of an army brat. So, because my dad moved around a lot. My brother and sister were raised across the country. But by the time I came along, we were living like in Adams, a very nice cushy life with like a driver.
Your dad was in the army?
My dad was in the army, yeah. So, which meant we lived the army life. We shopped at AFCO and we had a driver and all of that.
So the prices are different. I've always wanted to ask someone who's there. I always say
this story. It cost nothing. Yeah, when I tell guys that we used to have like Lions Made delivered every weekend, they're like, sorry. Just like, but he was pretty senior in the army, right? But that was mostly like most of primary school, and then halfway through primary school, my dad retired from the army. My mom was at what is now Unilever. Back then it was East African Industries, so she was there for about 14 years.
Wow.
So it was in high school when my mom left and then went into full-time ministry. So just even
full-time
like
ministry as an evangelist, pastor?
All the above, pastor, prophet, you name it.
So you can speak in tongues.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
So But then when I contrast the two, because I almost feel like I lived a life of privilege and then I lived a life of meat once a week. Because also like 80s into the 90s, a lot changed. It was like when you think about politically what was happening in the 80s versus the 90s, multipartyism, all of that. So there was sort of like a transition. So even like the gap between my brother and myself is like 7 years. They went to Moi Forces Academy, which was very, like I used to go and be like, no, I'm the third or four. Yeah. So by the time I was getting to high school, I was like, even me, MFA, I went to another XYZ school in the middle of nowhere. So oh my God.
I do my research quite well.
Where the hell did you find this information? I have worked very hard
to hide it.
To erase. It must have been Facebook. It could only have been Facebook.
Quite well. I do my research quite well.
Making a day. Yeah, I give you props. So I ended up in the hills of Mboni, which is where my mom is from, but my grandma was also just down the road from my XYZ school.
You refused to acknowledge Mboni.
So, by the way, it made me sure. You know, they say high school is the formative whatever. So just psychologically, I didn't really feel like I had an identity. If anything, my identity at that time was formed in church. So and sometimes when I think about it now, I feel like it might have been also like a knee-jerk reaction. So I got into the arts a lot. Like in high school, I was in drama, music, basketball, believe it or not. But that was a strategy to leave school. I was like, first term, there's drama and basketball. Second term, there's music first. Third term, there's like something else. So in my head, I was like, because I can't go home, at least I can get to leave this place that I hate so much. But what I didn't realize, of course, subtextually was there was this arm that was being created, sort of this interest in like, the arts are kind of interesting. But then coupled with being in a very active youth group at church, where I was immediately put in leadership positions, I was like taking people's children to camps over the holidays, and just like in the middle of nowhere, we've taken people for like, I don't know how many days. So all of those ended up being sort of like what I consider my formative leadership years, because it was a muscle that was being trained that I didn't know. I mean, people think of me as a producer now, like I went to school to learn producing. I actually didn't. I just learned leadership and then happened to apply it to a thing that I love.
Interesting. It's like I remember I was having some conversation the other day with Susie, and you were just talking about entrepreneurship. And for me, I think one of my summary out of it is that leadership is primarily everything that any person needs. If you are good in leadership, you can do everything. And being the daughter of what's it called, someone in the army, how exactly was it growing up? Because I know how army guys are here. Army guys are like very strict, very well organized. How exactly? How was dad?
My dad was a very reserved person, very quiet, but very, I don't want to say organized and orderly, because that's what they teach in the army. They teach you to wash your own clothes, they teach you time, all of that. So it felt like it was my dad, but it was actually just the way our home was. Our home was just, I don't want to think like it ran like a military school, but there was definitely a sense of order. Even my sense of like order now comes from that. And for me, it wasn't different. It was just like, that's how things are. That's how it works, you know. But my dad was like breakfast at the same time every day, lunch at the same time.
What time?
4 o'clock tea without fail. Breakfast was like 7:30. Even now, before he passed away, it was the same structure remained. And again, I only recognized this when I was older. But for me, it was just normal. Lunch is at this time. He always has tea at this time, and it was just. And even if you don't serve it, he'll be sitting there waiting. He'll just be in his seat. He'll turn on, watch the news, and you'll just know, hey, you didn't pick a chai.
It's up to you.
And even when it was late, so because even as he got older, I could see him just being graceful, like, no, it's fine. He'll go take a walk, come back. So I think just when I think about the kind of person he was very well put together. And I don't just mean that like physically, just like as a human, he was very organized in the way he did his things, very private, also very reserved, very quiet. You would have to draw him out. Like you'd have to sit down and watch like Jamhuri Day things and then half an hour into that, have a conversation about one thing. But then it's also like when you think about when he was raised, because like he was serving under MO1. So Moi, for those who don't know who MO1 is, right? So you can sort of understand his character and how he was built around that. So I literally got to know more about him like as he was older. Then back then I was just like, my dad is like that. Even like people I went to school with would know, like school would be ending at 4:30, my dad would be there at 3:15. There was a blue pickup parked at St. George's back in like, CK, your dad is here. I'm like, well, I guess I'm going straight home.
There's something similar about your dad and my dad. Completely different, the same.
Really?
Organized, or whatever, you have to draw them out. They know everything about history.
Yes,
And
very structured.
You mentioned also about your mom who transitioned from corporate into ministry.
Yeah.
What happened? Was it like
you're gonna have to ask her? I don't know.
was she like Paul and then heading to Damascus and then you're called?
Just like leave your tent making.
Come here.
Actually, I don't know. I should actually ask her.
Yeah.
I know it was always something she wanted to do. I'm not sure why at that point she chose to leave corporate.
Yeah.
But I don't even think of her as she's a totally different person. Like my mom before ministry and my mom after. I'm like, of course, to her she's the same person.
Yeah.
But then there's more of who she really is now. Like the post Unilever days.
Yeah.
She definitely became, this is me, what I want to do. And it's so funny when she even talks about it, she's like, I had a conversation with your father.
Yeah.
And I told him this is what I was doing. He was like, okay, if that's what you want to do. And it's just, it was like, it was agreed, you know.
Oh.
And it was, but it's also the context of like women who've had jobs, raised children. You get to a point where you're like, okay, simko sawa.
Yeah.
Me, I've got to do my
Let me
thing
go do
type
my
of
things.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for her, of course, it ended up being ministry.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of women that age who've done that, right? But for me, I feel like that's what she was always meant to do, and she's quite comfortable doing it.
So how exactly was it growing in a household whereby you have someone in the ministry and someone in the military? So it's like an military and ministry.
You know, no one has ever asked me that question. Yeah, so, and then also because me, I naturally gravitated to church naturally. But I remember primary school being like, I don't want to say difficult, but I was a bit of a rebellious child over there those last years. Because also I was the last born for a long time. So my last born sister and I...
7 years?
No, that's me and my brother.
Oh, the brother before you?
Yeah, so the brother before me is 7 years, and my sister and I think is like 9 years.
Sheesh,
so there's huge gaps. So me, I was last born for a hot minute, and I was really last borning. So even by the time my small sister came along and I was still in the picture, there's still a part of and me. So I was very much it's middle child syndrome. So I feel like even when I was in primary school, because my brother and sister did very well in primary, they were always number 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Me, I was just like, what is a number? I didn't know, again, creative streak in its inception. Back then, I was really not about structure and rules and all that. And I honestly did not find any interest in that formal education. So I felt like I was trying very hard to be something I was not. And again, this is because now I have the language to say that. But back then I was just like, I want to hang out with my friends, or I'm going to go to that party and then come home and be chapwad or whatever. So I did feel the push to be like in a structure. So particularly with my parents, I feel like church was a form of parenting. At least she's in church.
Interesting. It was her own church, or she joined a particular church?
We all went to Nairobi Baptist. We were all raised at Nairobi Baptist.
So you're all
church.
Baptist?
Yeah, and to this day my mom still goes there. So it's where I feel like I was probably more active than my older brother and sister. But that's of course because by high school I was doing all this stuff.
So quote unquote was baptism by fire?
100%. But which fire is the question? Yeah. There are different kinds.
What are the lessons that you picked up from your dad and your mom? Because it's a very interesting context that you grew up in. What would you say are some of the lessons that, for me, when I look back, these are some of the things I picked up that I'm actually, it's part of my life and my culture right now? I think that leadership is not complicated. I think people like to be like, read Stephen Covey, and definitely that has value, but I think the first place you learn that is at home, by seeing how a mother organizes a home, by seeing how a father provides for a home, and that's a very conventional contextual context that I'm referring to, because there's also single parent homes that have that. So for me, I think subconsciously I didn't realize that I was being trained in sort of that discipline and that drive and passion at a very young age, because even now when I look back, I'm like, I may not have been pursuing the thing, but I already had it, and that came from a home that was already organized. I mean, my dad, aside from being in the army, was a farmer for the longest time. Your dad was a farmer?
Yeah, so even when he retired, he went back to, he was always farming. He just was like, me, I'm just going to do this full time.
Like, I'm sure the crops used to respect. I'm like, no weeds, no weeds. No weeds, the military man is coming.
And so I think even, and my dad, when I was younger, like in the 80s,
Yeah.
he'd come, the blue pickup would come home every Sunday, and it would have oranges and mangoes and bananas. And so we were doing farm to fork before
nice.
there was even farm to fork.
Yeah.
You know, everyone is
And
talking
organic
about
farming.
it now. Organic farming is how I was raised, you know. But then there's also like the character of a farmer that people don't often talk about, is just like, and particularly that kind of farming in Shags where you're waiting for the rain and, you know.
The patience.
So yeah, that patience and all of that. And there's a part of me that is only being revealed now, where I'm just like, oh, that's what he was doing. Okay, dope, noted. So I think I was raised in a very balanced environment where there's definitely, because my dad was a realist, very grounded as well. And then my mom is like a faith person, very driven. And so I think the dream side of me and the storytelling side of me definitely comes from my mom.
Because faith has to come with actions.
100%. But then the like producer side is definitely my dad.
You have to be stickler.
100. I'm a stickler for everything, like to perfectionism, and I'm trying to let go of the perfectionism. But yeah, I think that's the balance I got from them.
Interesting. So you mentioned at 19 you already knew what you wanted and you went for it. How was that transition and how did your parents take it?
I didn't really know what I wanted. I wanted money.
Yes, okay.
Producer hadn't been formed yet.
Yes, the money.
Yeah,
yes.
so I wanted money, and while being in that space, because you know how when you're in high school, I don't know if you guys did this, there's that year, I think it's like in the first term of fourth form where they bring you the forms for university.
Yes.
And I was like, I kind of like Catherine Casavoli, television. I kind of, like, that's how I picked my majors. Because me, I was just like, the only thing I enjoy is TV. So I'm just going to take TV. So I wasn't even thinking or anything. I think I did like mass communication at some point. But I definitely wasn't thinking, when I leave high school, I'm going to work for, no, it wasn't anything like that.
It was just money.
Yeah, it was just money. I don't feel like I'd fully processed the thought. And so when I ended up at a TV station and I walked into a studio and I was like, oh, this is interesting, I kind of started to explore the idea. A few months later, some friends are like, come run our production house. I was like, oh, what's that? And so then I end up in the middle of the thing that would now become my future. So, and I even tell this story just to encourage people, stop overthinking it. Because I think sometimes we put young people under so much pressure for like, you must go to school. Please note my first 6 years, all the people who are my older friends were like, when are you going to school? When are you going to campus? When are you going to... So under pressure, I went to UON and did a random diploma somewhere.
After how long?
I think I was like 21, 22.
Oh, that was just under pressure. Just to tick a box.
I think I was like, I think I was 21 because I'd been at Family Media for about a year. Then I started running my friend's company. So
Family Media. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's where my...
I'm sure
my
that was... Mom led you there?
No, just people I knew. You know, these church circles, like... Yeah, the person who's the head of the PR department at the time was a good friend. So she was like, oh, there's this job thing. And so she hooked me up. I trained under Moniki Mageria. I was literally in the same marketing. Yeah, we're in the same department with him.
Moniki has been it for so long.
Forever.
Yes, it feels like a grandfather.
Like, he's legendary. Yeah. So the production arm was born around then. But then I was like, because I kept feeling like I need papers. And so it's like, to get everybody off my back, I'm going to do this business administration thing at you. And sawa. So I'd work until 5 and then jump in a mat, come to Tao, and then I'd be in class until 8 and then get home so tired and repeat it over and over again. I do not know what I was doing because I still ended up going to film school later. So, but then it just felt like I was just doing the thing that everybody does because I was just like, okay, everybody's in school. Maybe I need to go to school.
Interesting.
But
so in the morning you're chasing paper, in the evening you're chasing paper.
Imagine. Of a different kind.
Of a different kind. Interesting. Yeah. So initially as you worked at Family Media, and then for how long were you there before you decided to transition?
It was about a year before then I started working for a small production company that was based out of Kilimani that was run by three friends who all had full-time jobs in production. And they were like, here's a camera, here's Final Cut, here's the tutorial, we've gone to work. Bye.
Back in the day, the tutorials?
Yeah, they came on little... CD? On a CD. And even it was the old IMAX that were like a little old school
with
TV.
The back.
Yes, with the big back. So literally how I learned camera work and editing was off of auto. I would put the camera on auto and I'd be told, go shoot the funeral, go shoot that wedding. So my weekends were spent shooting music videos and like weddings and all of that. And then during the week, I'd be editing them and calling clients and meeting clients and all of that. And
that was in your 20s?
That was my
fun.
early 20s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it was fun. I mean, I was making good money. I think that was the best part of it because all my other friends are like dying in campus. I'm like, oh, your life is so hard. Me, I'm just like here spending money in my early 20s. But then again, the thing I didn't realize, all these were my so-called formative days in production because there's a lot about the industry. I mean, I walked in, I was busy asking you guys questions already for like, and I'm like, now as a producer, you can't lie to me. I literally, because I've been in the technical space, I literally understand end to end. Yeah.
Interesting. How would you say the formative years were for you? And if you were to advise anybody actually that will want to get into production, how would you advise for them to go through it?
So for me, they were very exciting. I think it was nice to be at that age doing something I love without thinking about, now we're thinking about overheads.
And all these terms.
Systems, capacity, all these big entrepreneurial terms. And I'm just like, who was I again at 20? So I think the thing that I enjoyed about those early years was the joy of just doing the thing I love and exploring. I really tried my hand at everything. I went into commercials, I did that. I told you I did weddings and music videos and all of that.
Funerals.
Yeah, by the way, everything for like filming with the casket open. Never doing that again.
You did that?
Yeah, imagine I did.
My goodness.
Wait.
I was having an earlier conversation with the dentist and she was telling me about the earlier life at Chiroma with the cadavers. So also for you were there with the cadavers.
Yo, kwanza in this day and age of trauma, I'm like, please, I can't do that. But then again, when you're young, right?
Yeah,
and I think, it's the thrill of it, and also almost a form of naivete because you don't know yet. You don't know what you don't know yet.
Yes.
And I was really driven by passion. And I use that word because somebody reminded me, because I went back to these guys. I was like, why did you guys hire me? They were like, you're just passionate and very clear. I was like, I was?
Interesting.
So I didn't even know that about myself at the time. And so even now when I look back at it, I feel like it was the best training ground because there weren't any walls, there weren't any boxes. It was a very difficult time to be in the industry though, because it was
in the 80s or 90s?
We're talking late 90s into early 2000s. So I started working like 99. But it was very male dominated. There were very few stations. So there's very few people who are doing this. So for me as a female to walk into a room, forget even a room, I used to climb onto a plane, going to Mombasa to shoot a thing, and I'm carrying this big camera and everyone's looking at me like, who's this 5'3" babe with like a huge camera? Is she okay?
Oh, yeah, it was the tips camera.
Yeah, because we're still doing tips.
Oh,
right?
yeah, sorry.
So it's also like, I think there was a boldness and a confidence that was built because also when I do these events that have like KTN, KBC, everybody's going for their shot and me, I'm just there for like, I'm too short. My boss was like, even you go shove them and you move and get your shot. So I think resilience was being built subconsciously. Leadership was being built subconsciously. I didn't know, but I think the freedom to just explore was literally paying your dues because you have to work your way up that ladder, whether you like it or not.
Interesting. And on that particular note, you're going to take a short commercial break, but we'll be back. Now we'll move from passion now to lemon, and you'll find back after the break. Welcome back to the show. Before we went on a break, it was quite an interesting conversation whereby Carol was taking us through the journey from the school she never liked to Mboni up to this particular point that you are in, whereby she got into production. I'm just saying it to tease you.
Yeah, I was just like, it's fine. I'm like, it's okay.
The cat is out of the bag.
Yeah, it's too late now.
Interesting. So, you ended up studying a diploma in business administration.
Yeah.
You worked for different particular production house, and then you found yourself to South Africa. How did that happen? How was that particular transition?
Yeah, so by the time I was considering, I'd been thinking about film school for a while because I'd been in the industry for maybe 4 or 5 years, and I felt like I had exposed myself to some form of filmmaking, but Kenya was not at the point where we had film schools. I wasn't trying to go to America or to the UK because I was just like, that's too far. And so I was working with a company at the time, which you would all know as Homeboys.
Microbar.
Yes, with Microbar and them. And we were At the time is when SEMA was being put together. We'd done the
SEMA, the group?
Yes, the music group. So we'd done the reality show.
Boy now. The same SEMA?
Yeah, Kwani, how many are there?
No, it's interesting. All right,
Yeah, so as part of the launch of the group, we had to do a music video, and the team, because the client was South African, who done, so Popstars was owned by a South African company.
Popstars,
yeah, but it was a show sponsored by Coke. So one of the things was the South African crew would come and film the first music video. So when that crew came, the lady who was a production manager on that job, she and I became good friends, and she was asking me, oh, what are you doing? What do you want to do? And I was like, oh, I really want to do film. She's like, oh, that's interesting. There's this amazing school that we have. So the next time she came back to Kenya, she brought me the prospectus for this film school. And at the time, it was just called AFDA. And I was like, this is it. I applied and I got in. This was the surprising thing, was that I got in. And I was like, okay, what does this mean to my retired parents? Because also nobody in my family had ever gone to university or left the country.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so...
Oh, none?
None.
Wow.
None.
It's only your mom who went to heaven. An evangelist.
It's funny you'd say that, because the decision for me to go to film school had a lot to do with my mom. Because she had to convince my dad that this thing is a serious thing. Because my dad was just like, what? South Africa? Who goes there? How is she going to survive? Like, of course, he had many questions. And I remember, even when she tells the story, what she said to him in Kao was like, this thing of CKs, I go by CK, but this thing of CKs is a serious thing. We need to let her do it. And I was like, even when she tells the story, I was like, oh, okay. Me, I was just like, I want to go to film school. And so anyway, I ended up going to film school, and I honestly really do thank my parents, because I know my parents, my church, and many friends who raised money to help me go. Because it really did change the trajectory for me in terms of my career and my business. And I really did become a different person, because also South Africa is not the country you just decide to pack your bags and go to. That was 2007. But I think it was the right thing to do. It was definitely a smart move.
Interesting. How was your experience there? So did you have to resign from your work and then go there?
Yes. Yes. So I had been working as a freelancer for a while. And to be honest with you, I was also a little bit bored. Because I'm the kind of person who gets very bored very quickly. That's just the way I'm built.
Doing
Yeah.
the same thing every day. Does it make sense? Different experiences.
Yeah. Let's change this around. But of course, at the time, I didn't know that. So I resigned and I moved to South Africa to study a Bachelor of Arts degree in motion picture. It was called motion picture medium. So it's basically everything to do with film. And that was the thing I was looking for. The only other place like that was the New York Film Academy, which of course I couldn't afford. But then when I got to South Africa, the thing I didn't realize, it wasn't just a change in terms of like, I'm going to learn this thing. It was also like, this is South Africa that just got independence 5 minutes ago. Oh
yes, Zebu.
Yeah. So and also like you're in a space that's very like from the perspective of Black people, they're very proud of their heritage and their identity. So even when I'd introduce myself and say, "Oh, my name is Carol," they're like, "Really?
Why are you
That's
being
your name?"
British? Yeah.
They're like, "You don't have another name?" I'm like, "Kyoko." They're like. So I was like, oh, you want me to use my middle name? So by the time I understood that, and I really am so grateful for my time in South Africa, because that's one of the things I walked away with, the pride in my skin color, in my name, and just this, we have an identity and a narrative that we really don't embrace as Kenyans. Kenyans, we're just an amalgamation of
many things.
Yeah. So I think that was one of the first things I appreciated. But then also that I was waking up and drinking film, eating film, sleeping film. It was everything that I wanted it to be. The biggest challenge also was that I was much older. All my classmates were like 18, 19, 20.
Now you're in your late 20s?
Driving BMWs that they were given for their 16th birthday.
Oh yes, the South Africans and BMWs and VWs.
But then it's also a privilege, because it's a film school, it's very much privilege, right? And I was over here at 26. I think the advantage of having worked in the industry was school wasn't difficult for me. So when guys were being taught fundamentals in cinematography, I was like, me, I've already shot before, but okay, teach me how to shoot on film. So So I got to shoot on film, which I think is just amazing. But then in terms of film language, there's something we talk about in the film industry called film language. It's how do you interpret a story into moving pictures, into light, into sound. That for me was the magic of film school, and just understanding how you can use those things to communicate a story. Yeah.
Interesting. So how long was your undergrad? Is it 4 years?
No, it was 3 years.
It was 3 years.
Yeah, it was 3 years.
And then how was your transition after?
Yeah, so I went from, I actually graduated in the year of the World Cup, which was 2020.
I hope you watched the World Cup.
Of course.
Oh,
First it was just like,
surprised me.
why would I be there not to watch it? But the thing about also being there during World Cup was it was so electrifying. I mean, most of the work I was doing at the time was related to the World Cup. I had a sports show that I was working on. But then coming out of the World Cup, so originally my plan was to come home. I told everybody, I'm coming back in 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm coming back in 3 years. And then I was like, World Cup.
So through the years, you never came back to Kenya?
I would come home during Christmas.
Yeah.
But then my plan was always like, when I graduate, I'll come home and I'll do the thing. Nothing else.
And there was no WhatsApp back then?
No, not yet. Facebook had just started.
So you used to poke people?
My patience. The work environment was very interesting and very exciting, and so I went from doing like those sports TV shows, and then I ended up in reality TV. And one of the shows that I worked on that everyone is always so excited about when I mention is a BBC show called Come Dine With Me South Africa.
Oh, yes.
Which is a cooking show, which now offered me the opportunity not only to stretch my directing arm. I started out as an associate producer and then ended up as a content director, but I also got to see so much of South Africa because it was a traveling show.
Yeah.
And also it was kind of like the perspective, it changed my perspective and my worldview drastically, which I really appreciated. And again, from a storytelling point of view, I feel like it was just opening up my options in a way that I didn't realize. And then eventually I would end up working on other reality shows, but I ended up being in South Africa for like 12 years. Wow. Unintentionally, but that entire time I was just freelancing as a producer.
So in South Africa, you all through the 12 years, you're just a freelance
Yeah,
producer.
I would work here on projects. I'd do one project, that one would isha, and then you have a break, and then they call you for the next season or whatever. So I was just working with different companies, but mostly the same kind of companies. The way South Africa is structured, unlike Kenya, where I can do a commercial and then do a film and then do a show, there you pick a track. If you're in reality, you can be busy all year just doing reality shows. If you're a commercials person, you can literally be busy just doing commercials. I mean, occasionally maybe you'll jump into a documentary, but the industry is so big and so segmented that you can actually just be a person who shoots drama series and that's it. Or I just work as a studio camera operator and that's it. So
you choose a line and choose a specialty.
Yeah, so even as you're building your CV, it's just like the referrals you're getting are all like in reality. Yeah, you might do a bit of a crossover occasionally, but then it's very likely that it's still within the same circle. So even for you to be like, I want to do film, it's like, okay, for how long are you going to tap out to go do film? Will you be able to come back to this thing? So it also kind of helped me refine, what is this thing really about? Do you just want to do random things for money? Or do you actually want to eventually end up doing film? And so slowly I kind of started to align myself. I was like, okay, put some money away and spend some time doing this, which is the thing that you really want to love, and which is how I kind of transitioned into film full time.
Interesting. And then how did Lemon Slice come about?
So Lemon Slice was an idea that I'd had. I think it came to me maybe beginning of 2011, but I didn't quite crystallize the idea. When I was young, I really thought I would just work for people for the rest of my life. I was just like, run a business, that's so much work. But the thing I realized, I at some point was very clear about what I wanted and what I wanted to build, and it had a lot to do with home. I was like, how? Because I'd come to Kenya and see where the industry is at, still no film schools, still like nothing is changing, nothing is moving, and then go to South Africa and it's just like, wow, this place, everything works, people are making money and buying houses off of this thing. How is that possible? So I was trying to find a way, a vehicle to kind of like merge this desire that I had. And so I just said I'd form a company. I didn't even do anything else about it. And then fast forward to about 2013, actually it was 2012 when some friends of mine had for 2 years been running something called the 48-hour film project. So one of them had done it in South Korea, and she'd come to Joburg and she was like, we have to do this thing. I was like, okay, I'll just volunteer. And so for 2 years I volunteered for the Joburg.
So the 48-hour film festival, I think even some friends of mine got involved, whereby you have to shoot a film and
Yes.
edit it and have it done
Yes.
within 48 hours.
Yeah,
Yes.
so you shoot a 4 to 7 minute film where you don't know anything about the film until Friday night, which is kickoff night, where you draw a genre out of a hat.
Oh,
And then you get a line of dialogue, a prop, and a character who's male or female who you have to include in the film. And then you have until Sunday, 7:30 to deliver it. And so for me, when I had this, I was just like, I should do this in Kenya. And so I needed a vehicle. So I was just like, okay, I'll register a company. And then I came home, mid of 2013, I came home. And I just bought a ton of people coffee. I was like, I want to do this thing. I want to do this thing. Just kind of like generating excitement and mostly with industry people, which was nice because I was trying to get a sense of like, is this thing doable? But the other thing that had happened before I even decided to do 48 was Nairobi Half-Life had dropped.
Oh, yes.
Because the 48-hour film project isn't mine. It's an international IP.
Yes.
Yeah, it's out of Washington, D.C. So for me to go to these guys and say, hey, I want to start this thing in Nairobi, they're like, do you guys have an industry?
Yeah.
I was like, let me just send you some stuff. And I send them
the only industry you
Half-Life.
have is the industrial area.
But they have this show. Is your dad joke?
Anyway, let's go.
So then we started to have the conversation about how feasible it is. And they do have like some smaller cities because internationally, when other like Paris does it, they have 150 teams. Those are 150 crews in a weekend. LA, 200 crews. So for me, I was just like, I don't even know if I can get 3. Because again, have I been home? I haven't been home. The people who know me are like older, they're doing other things. So there's very much a lot of groundwork and introduction I had to do. But in end of 2013, I started the 48-hour film project.
So you're a syndicate?
No, you're a city producer. And a city producer, you kind of just sign a contract and then you're empowered to represent the brand in your city. Yeah, so I represent the 48-hour film project in Kenya.
Interesting.
Yeah,
and so you've been running for the last, is it 6 or 7 years?
It's been, in 10 years, I've done 7 of them because the first one was in 2013. And then, of course, there was that weird window over there where we didn't do anything for the pandemic. So this is my year 7.
Wow,
yeah.
That's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And as Lemon Slice, so you've worked as a freelance producer, which is very different because here, like you just wait for a call or a referral.
Yeah.
You get a business, now you're trying to now run your business. How exactly has it been? So after the 48-hour film, whatever you're to represent, you've gotten yourself into the local industry. How exactly has it been for you now to establish yourself locally?
So it's interesting because originally my business was Joburg and Nairobi because I was still definitely doing the back and forth. But Lemon Slice became the vehicle through which I could unashamedly prioritize film. And for me, I was like, if I'm going to prioritize film and build film in Kenya specifically, yes, I have a company that's an avenue, but I need an ambassador. So then I became the ambassador where I was like, I'm a film producer. This is what I've done. This is my track record. And that became the way through which I started channeling work into the company. Because without that, you're just a name. You're just another person who's registered a name. Yeah. You're just a lemon. That's a slice. So the thing that helped particularly with the 48-hour film project is because I needed crews as well. I needed to ascertain the level at which the industry is at. And so 48 really became like the training ground for like, okay, are there any camera operators? Are there any sound engineers? Let's see who they are. And the 48-hour film project is like I'm testing you, my probation. So I was like, make a film. And so the thing, even now that it still continues to do, because it was important for me to also define where in the industry it sits, it still continues to be the pathway through which a lot of young talent is, okay, you really want to do film? Let's see, make a movie in 48 hours. If you can do this one, entrepreneurship, you'll be okay.
Yeah, but it's true.
Because it's very much guerrilla filmmaking, which is
by fire again.
100%. So even as I was doing that, because for me, 48 is definitely in my company, my impact arm. Like, how do you give back to the society, and particularly a film industry in a country where there isn't so much support for the industry? How do you still let people believe in the magic of film and cinema? So like when you sit in a cinema and you've just like, maybe you're a USIU student and you've made a short film and you're telling your parents, come see my movie on the screen. They're like, hey, hii ni ile kitu. Hey, hii ndio filmmaking, you know. And that stuff is really important in an industry where it feels like us guys are working so hard for bare minimum. So I had to recognize the role that it plays, while at the same time still building a sustainable business that can still offer like narrative film as an option. And that is two-pronged. I have work that I do with international clients, and then I have the work that I do with local clients, because for me, both are important. The local industry is important, but also that international arm to ensure that these narratives that we are making are the ones that we are seeing in cinemas across the world because they're made by us.
Interesting. And you've mentioned to us in terms of now trying to establish the business both locally and also internationally. But one of the interesting things, you're in a business whereby you're selling stories. It's an invisible thing, but comes out in a product as a film or as a movie. How difficult has it been, especially locally? Because in South Africa, I believe it's a norm. Kenya is an industry that's coming up. How difficult has it been for you to establish yourself in such a market? Whereby you tell someone it'll cost 20 million or 10 million to do this movie.
You know, sometimes it's interesting because I feel like it's easier to be a storyteller now because compared to when I left,
yes,
I was just like Half-Life wasn't even a reality. But then the fact that we actually have films that are on Netflix that are Kenyan, so it's so much easier to say I am a creative producer, which is what I call myself, which is very specific. So now it's a lot easier. At the beginning, it wasn't. And I think I'm grateful that I got to start that journey in South Africa because people always use that as an excuse. Oh, yeah, it's because she's in SA, you know, type of thing. So by the time I'm coming back home, it's not weird anymore. We've normalized, we want to tell our own stories and we want to make films and all of that. So I think the demand for what we call now content has really helped us producers. But I even say that with a massive caveat because there's still very few narrative producers. There's quite a number of documentary filmmaking producers, but those who are actually doing fiction feature films, I can count on one hand. So
what's your specialization?
I wouldn't call it a specialization. It's just I prefer to do narrative feature films, which means the one that is not a documentary is the one I make. So not to say that I don't do documentaries, but my primary focus is stuff like Half-Life and Supermodo, so where it is a fictional story. So that is like, at a core, it exists as my company does that. But I still have to pay rent. So bado kuna kakazia CNN hapa, unajua, you know, when you call me for a video for Instagram, I'ma do it for you. But then that's to ensure that your overheads are covered, right? But the focus of the company still is very much feature films.
And they've talked about the overheads and now, because it's very different now, because I know being a creative, you're always so immersed into the aspect of creation, and you just wait to be paid. Here now you're an entrepreneur, you have to cover your overheads, as you've mentioned, you have to run a business, you have to pay people. How has that transition been, and what exactly have you learned being that now, because you're running it as a business? Besides being a creative, you're also running it as a business. How's that been for you? It's
actually been very difficult because you don't learn this stuff in film school. As much as I was not giving credit to my UN diploma days, there's the language of creative business is not specifically like a course somewhere. So this is the on-the-job training that you have to learn. And so I've been privileged to sit in like master classes and labs and programs outside of Kenya where I've learned from other industry experts. This is what budgeting looks like. This is what a company structure for a creative business looks like. Because sometimes, and I kind of feel like right now content developers are going through that, where it's nice that you can be doing reels for a living, but make it make sense. You know, like how is this in a company structure? How does this run? So I've very much had to, like many producers here, to innovate a model that works for me and also works in the context of my niche, because my company is very niche. A lot of people, particularly in Kenya, use servicing. So when you hear these people who are coming to shoot, I don't know, Lion King, watu wako Masai Mara, that's a huge income generator in terms of a business, because you can just service for international crews to come and do that. But also that's just only one piece of the business. You still have to pursue what your actual goal is. And for me, it's very much developing film. And so what I do is I reinvest. I take, if I do a job, I take a certain percentage of that and I reinvest into the personal projects, which I hope eventually will now pay back, because I'm still very passionate about seeing our stories told. But that is the long game. I'm like, if anybody's watching this for like, oh, I'm going to be a...
It's a long game.
Please don't fool yourself. Go sell potatoes. Just go to that, your quota. Plant some tomatoes. Because this is definitely And I honestly, I speak about my story with a lot of gratitude because I think I'm very blessed in that sense. But it's not an easy one to crack because our industry is still very young. We still haven't normalized filmmaking. We still, even the industries we make reference to, we talk about South Africa a lot. And look, South Africa has a lot of government support.
Yes.
There's literally people who just run their film business from just getting grants from the government, right? We are not there yet. We are still fighting this uphill battle to normalize it. And that's why we are still doing I'll do some servicing work and then I'll do a feature film here and there. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
If you look back through your journey, because it's been a very interesting journey.
Yeah.
More than 2 decades, right?
Yeah, a little over.
What would you say has been your greatest, lessons that you can actually share to anybody watching this and anybody wants to aspire to get into film? That's one lesson that you can actually get to share from your journey. And it's very difficult to summarize more than 20 years.
It's difficult to summarize one, but the one that stands out for me is you're already the thing. I think a lot of us, I spent a lot of my 20s trying to prove to myself that I know what I'm doing. Like all this freelance work I was doing, I was already a producer way before I knew it. And I also kind of look back at that time with some grace and some kindness. But then I definitely do believe that a lot of people know the thing. You just don't have the confidence and the boldness. You may need a little bit of training. You may need some guidance, but the clarity, that feeling that you have, 100%, lean into it. That's one. Two, we need to stop raising people under stress and labor intensive, because I feel like there's a place where we can do what we love in balance, right? True. I was raised in an environment where working hours are plus 12 hours. Like it was always high stress, high intensity all the time. And that is normalized in a way that is not healthy. And now, therefore, I do CrossFit 4 times a week. I am in therapy every so often. Now I have to create a life for balance, because when I started out so, I went so hard, right? And so now I'm a huge advocate for balance. And so I'm also just pick the thing. You don't have to do all things. Pick the thing that you know is your thing and do it well. Put all your energy into that. Don't kill yourself at it because I can make money from 5 of these jobs that are paying me 20K. And then I'm like,
You become tired and don't.
And then after that, where are you going to spend that 100 G's?
In
you
hospital.
Just be, thank you very much, paying Nairobi Hospital all your money, right? So I'm a huge advocate for balance, and particularly in our production industry that hasn't been very healthy. Me, I wasn't raised in a healthy environment. People used to scream at us from across.
I know.
And I'm just like, how is that humanizing at all, right? So I'm very big on creating safe spaces, particularly for women, and promoting female stories, because I feel like that's the thing that I didn't have. And so my business is focused on that. If it's not a safe space, if it's not something I'm passionate about, if it doesn't celebrate minority voices, don't call me.
All right, interesting. Thanks so much for this particular conversation. Probably just 3 quick fire questions as we just come to an end. The first question, what scares you?
Fear of failure.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would that be?
Oh my God. Actually, I really think Kenya. Yeah.
What's your hobby?
My hobby?
Yeah.
Sitting on the couch.
That's the balance.
That's the balance.
Your favorite day of the week?
Sunday.
How long does it take for you to get ready?
For what?
For church.
For this, depends. Sometimes for a shoot, maybe half an hour. For other things, an hour and a half.
At what age do you want to retire?
Oh, never. Hey, 42 right now. Yeah.
How many hours do you need to sleep? How many hours do you need to sleep?
Minimum.
Yes.
8 hours.
Yours?
Yes.
Climb a mountain or jump from a plane?
Climb a mountain.
Who inspires you?
Myself.
You're like Snoop Dogg. I thank myself for being me.
100%.
So it got an interesting conversation with Carol Kioko, who's the founder of Lemon Slice. And unfortunately, didn't have lemons here, but it was a very interesting conversation. Thanks so much for having watched the show. Hope you've learned a thing or two from this particular conversation. And I think we need to do a part 2. As always, they're coming to you live from the Capital Club, the place you need to be. At the Capital Club, there's quite a huge area of amenities that can actually get to serve you. You can literally start and end your day here. In the morning, you can do your gym here. You can have your spa. You can do your meetings. And in the evening, you can have a wind down. Every Thursday, there's always the band and entertain your guest. So always check out the Capital Club. My name is Ian Dennis, and this has been the Late Night Business. As always, thank you so much for having watched the show. Until next time, see you right here on KTN Home.